Blessed is the one who subscribes to this channel. Remember the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated.
Welcome to Spirituality in Society.
Okay, get this right. Imagine you've been super into your faith your whole life, going to church every week, doing all the things, and then bam, you find out this whole idea of a worship service.
Oh.
It's going to be totally made up.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're going to dig into today. What did the very first Christians actually do when they got together?
Right.
We've got this awesome YouTube video from a New Testament scholar, Tom Wadsworth, and we're going deep into the transcript.
Cool.
Seriously, get ready to rethink some stuff.
It is kind of wild how much we just assume about church, huh?
Totally. We just think, oh, it's Sunday, gotta go to worship. But it wasn't always like that.
Not even close.
So Wadsworth is a total Bible expert, and after years of studying, it hit him. The New Testament almost never uses the word worship to talk about Christian gatherings.
And he's not the only one who noticed this, right?
Nope. Tons of scholars from all different kinds of churches have been saying this since the 1950s.
Really? That long?
Yeah, they use words like astonishing, startling. They can't believe how different it was back then.
Interesting.
One guy, Franklin Young, straight up said Christians had nothing to do that could be called worship in the cultic sense.
Oh.
Right. That's intense. And by cultic, he means tied to a specific system of religious worship.
Okay.
Lots of rituals and all about the divine.
Gotcha.
Then there's this other scholar, Robert Banks. He points out that Paul, wrote all those letters in the New Testament. Never once, not once, did Paul say people went to church mainly to worship.
Makes you think, what were they doing then? If it wasn't like what we think of as worship.
Exactly. See, back then, worship was all about temples, sacrifices, priests, super formal. But after Jesus died,
Everything changed.
yeah. So picture this. It's not some fancy temple. It's a house church.
Okay.
No robes, no incense, just normal people hanging out in their everyday clothes, probably sitting on couches, totally focused on teaching each other and supporting one another.
So different from what we think.
Yeah, huge shift.
It seems like it was way more about the community, those relationships, less about just focusing on God.
Yeah, it wasn't just me and God, it was us together.
Right. Now, I'm not saying they didn't pray or sing or anything.
Yeah,
But those things weren't the main event.
got it. So Wadsworth talks about these two different models to help explain this. The worship model, which is what a lot of us know.
You go to a holy building, there's this beautiful service, everyone's super reverent.
Exactly. Then there's the edification model, which is more about personal growth.
So the building itself doesn't matter that much. It's just a place to meet. The point is to help everyone become more mature in their faith and more loving.
Which one feels more, relevant to you?
I think for me, that edification model is pretty powerful.
Me too. It's less about putting on a show and more about actually changing from the inside out.
Yeah, totally. And get this, it wasn't just Christians doing that.
Oh.
Yeah, turns out, research on those old Jewish synagogues from the same time period, they weren't calling their meetings worship either. More about learning in community, just like those early Christians.
Wow, so if worship wasn't the big focus, what was? What did they actually care about in those gatherings? It's crazy. They didn't even call it a service.
It's true. We always say going to service or a worship service, but that whole idea seems to be, missing from the New Testament.
It really makes you wonder, right? How did our language even change so much over time?
Right. Yeah, for them it was just a gathering or an assembly, Simple as that. They got together to learn, to encourage each other.
Build each other up. That's edification, right?
Exactly. Edification. Seems like that was the heart of it all, really.
And Wadsworth is really serious about this whole edification thing. He says Paul basically demanded that everything in these gatherings had to focus on building each other up. Not just worshiping God in some vague way, but doing real concrete stuff that made the community stronger.
Interesting. So instead of focusing on, the minister, the music, how beautiful the building is.
The early Christians were all about each other.
It was about those relationships, the horizontal ones, not just the vertical one with God.
It'll flip, right. What we think of as church today is almost the opposite of how they did things.
It is pretty radical when you think about it, that shift in perspective.
Yeah.
Instead of asking, how can we best worship God? They were asking, how can we best serve each other?
Powerful.
Definitely. It feels so much more I don't know, grounded and practical.
Yeah, and imagine leaving every gathering feeling truly encouraged, like you actually had the tools to live a better life because of it. That's pretty awesome.
So if you look closely at what they were doing, how did this edification actually play out? What did it look like in practice?
It's funny, we often think of worship as, vertical. You sing to God, you pray, you listen to a sermon. But a lot of what they did, at least according to the New Testament, was horizontal.
So less about me and God and more about us together again. Totally. They were teaching each other, encouraging each other, sharing meals, helping each other out in practical ways.
There's that community aspect.
Yeah, it wasn't just about like being super holy on your own. It was about belonging to this group that had your back, but also, challenged you to grow.
So then how did we get from there to here? What happened? Those early gatherings sound so different from what we used to.
It's a big question. I mean, the shift from focusing on edification to focusing on worship didn't happen overnight. It was a process, centuries really.
Lots of stuff mixed in together to cause that shift.
Totally. History, culture, theology, all kinds of factors.
So how do we even start to, untangle that web?
Well, let's think about the temple.
Okay.
In the Old Testament, the temple was everything. Sacrifices, rituals, priests. It was the place to be if you wanted to connect with God.
It was like the physical representation of that connection.
Exactly. But then, Jesus.
Right. He changed everything. His death kind of made the temple irrelevant.
In a way, yeah. It's like he became the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah. So it created this void, didn't it?
It did. If the temple wasn't the center of worship anymore, then what was? Where was God's presence? How were people supposed to connect with him? Show their devotion?
It's like they had to reinvent the whole concept of worship from the ground up.
Yeah. Figure out what it meant to connect with God and with each other in this new world without the temple. And their solution, meeting in homes, edification, community, it was truly unique.
But it didn't stick around forever. What caused that shift away from those simple gatherings?
Well, as Christianity grew, it started bumping into the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire had some pretty strong opinions on how religion should work.
So the Roman Empire, big, powerful, how did they change things?
Well, Roman religion was all about structure, like super organized. Temples, priests, rituals, sacrifices, very formal, very top down. And as Christianity became more popular,
it started to kind of like absorb some of that Roman style.
Exactly. It was a gradual blend. And it really took hold when,
Christianity became the official religion of the whole empire.
Yeah. Think about it. Suddenly you've got imperial support, money, big buildings, a need to organize all of these new Christians.
So those little house churches turned into giant cathedrals, and those intimate gatherings became these big formal ceremonies.
Right, and the language shifted too. They started using the word worship more and more to describe these events. Less about mutual support, more about reverence and awe directed toward God.
Like, look at how amazing God is.
Exactly. And you know what else comes in around this time? Liturgy.
Ah, yeah. Those set prayers and rituals and responses.
Which honestly makes sense for those larger gatherings, right? You need some kind of order, some uniformity.
Keeps things from getting too chaotic.
Right. But it also reinforced this idea that worship was something you did for God, not something you experienced with each other.
So it's amazing to see how history shaped how we do church today. But knowing all this, are we stuck with this worship model, even if it's not what those first Christians did?
It's a good question. And honestly, a tough one. No easy answers. But I think the key is just being aware of how we got here. Knowing the history lets us look at our practices with fresh eyes, Ask ourselves if they're really working.
It's almost like we need to rediscover what those early gatherings were all about. That focus on edification, on being a real community, supporting each other, challenging each other.
Yeah, like actually living your faith, not just talking about it.
Those first Christians, they went through a lot. Persecution, hardship, but they found strength in each other, in their shared faith.
And in building each other up.
So as we finish up this deep dive, think about this. If you took away all the fancy stuff, all the bells and whistles of modern worship, what would be left? What's really important for a gathering to be truly edifying?
Yeah, how can we get back to that core, that authentic connection and growth that was so essential for those early Christians? Mm-hmm. It's a question worth pondering. It might just lead us to a richer, more meaningful experience of faith.
Blessed is the one who subscribes to this channel. Remember the golden rule. treat others as you want to be treated.